We'll start up here in about 30 seconds.
Dude, you know where that's...
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the September 2nd, 2015 Legal and Finance Committee meeting. Maggie, if we can do a roll call and a determination of quorum, please. Here. Thank you. Next item I have on the agenda is to adopt the agenda. Is there anybody wishing to add or delete or change the agenda? Seeing none, may I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Alderwoman Drew, second by Alderman Roberts to adopt the agenda. Those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Now is the time for the general public comments for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. Action will not be taken at this meeting on any issue not on the agenda, except by placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of the council members present. Is there any? I do not have any speaker request forms for items 1 through 13 as well. Any general comments first? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period for items 1 through 13 as well. Is there any council member wishing to remove the items 1 through 13 from the agenda? Seeing no lights, may I have a motion to adopt the items 1 through 13?
Second.
Motion made by Alderman Laurenti, second by Alderwoman Drew to approve the consent items 1 through 13. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to items that are not on the consent calendar, which is items 14 through 20. We will open it up to public comments for items 14 through 20, and I have about 4 or 5 speaker request forms, and we will start with Dane Boomsma on item number 19, please. You have 3 minutes.
I'm Dane Boomsma, Boom Construction. In regards to the upping the number of credit hours needed, from my understanding, its motivation came from, or this came aboard because of some mechanical guys that thought it should be 12 hours instead of 6. As contractors, we get continuing education through lumber yards most generally, which are product demonstrations and luncheons is what it amounts to. That going from 12 or 6 to 12 is not going to increase the knowledge of a contractor in the city of Rapid City. Now, the mechanical guys may have different criteria for their continuing education, but as a general contractor, if we want to educate our contractors to become better contractors on the true issues that we see across the city needs to sponsor some mandatory renewal credit hours. For example, like the new soils ordinance, there could be an education class on the soils process and how that happens, and it needs to be a mandatory. It's no different than I'm licensed in Pennington County for my septic license to install septic systems. If you miss their class, you have to go to Minnesota to get it. It's a mandatory class to renew your license. And the reason they do that is because they want to educate the contractors on specific points that they see problems with. So I think the city needs to take that approach, up in the hours from 6 to 12 over a 3-year period. Would be no big deal to get without even thinking about it. Go to 4 or 5 lunches, you have 12 hours. We're not bettering the contractors in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boomsma. Next speaker request form I have here is Mr. Jim Jackson. Mr. Jackson, if you will come to the podium, you have 3 minutes and introduce yourself for us.
Jim Jackson with Rosenbaum Signs out in Rapid City here. For us, it's for upping, and I'm against the upping these to 12 hours. As for the sign business, we have to travel for everything that we have to do. And I'm not talking that we're going to travel across to Sioux Falls. I'm talking we're going to have to travel out to the East Coast or to California on the West Coast to do any kind of education for us. We also have for our rigging and stuff like that. So we're already initiating that stuff. But for us to add 12 more or 6 more hours to what we already have mandated on us, which I, for one, do not like being mandated any more by the government than they already have out there. So I live with the 6 hours, but I think it's just a little too much. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker request I have here in front of me is Mr. Rick Aspig. Mr. Aspig, if you will come to the podium and introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Rick Aspig, REA Construction. I'm against the lengthening the hours of continuous education. Like Dane had pointed out, most of it is just a luncheon and product information, which is good to know, but those of us that are licensed in the city, we know those products, we know how to install them properly. It's the unlicensed contractors out there that don't, and we're getting, in my opinion, we're getting punished for being licensed contractors because the city has no way to regulate the unlicensed contractor. So I'm against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aspig. The next speaker request form I have on number 19 is Jay Mendel. Jay, if you'll come forward and introduce yourself, again, you have 3 minutes.
Jay Mendel, President of the Black Hills Home Builder Association. At this time, we feel that upping these hours, it's putting more burden on us to find them. The city takes no role in sponsoring any or putting any on at this time. They do not track the hours anymore. More hours, like everybody says, just means more luncheons on product information. I would like to see maybe some mandatory classes such as Dane pointed out on some of the hot button issues, so maybe they don't become ordinances. Maybe they can get handled that way. But at this point in time, without the city stepping up and putting any part into this, we're opposed to it.
Very good. Thank you. Next speaker request form I have here is for Jeff Loggy. Mr. Loggy, if you'll come forward and introduce yourself. Again, you have 3 minutes. Okay, that works for me.
Yeah, Jeff Loggy, Government Affairs for Black Hills Home Builders. I really have nothing more to add besides reiterate as far as our opposition to this right now. I think there's some clarifications. Whether the mechanical can get split from other ones, I think there's lots of ground to do this because this was mechanically based, and I'm not going to say they shouldn't do more. I mean, if there's that much information they need to keep receiving, I would say by all means. But I think somehow the trades, when this got combined during the previous administration, we were worried about things like this because we did have control of our factor. They had control of theirs. And I think some of those other groups were a little weaker and didn't have the input from other trade within their own trades. So, I can't support this at this time, but I would like to hear from building inspection here and get their input too.
Thank you, Jeff. Let's see. Next item is Tanchi Weaver. If you'll come forward, you want to speak on number 14 and number 16? Would you identify yourself, please?
Yes, sir, I do. Yes, my name is Tanchi Weaver. I'm here as a representative of South Dakota Citizens for Liberty Incorporated. We're a local citizens group that whose mission is to promote limited government and to guard the principles of freedom and self-governance at all levels. On your agenda today, we would like to go on record as opposing two items. We object to item number 14 in your published agenda because it removes the oversight of the confirmation process. We believe it is important for the directly elected representatives of the people to ratify key people in the executive branch of government. For that reason, we encourage you to preserve that function to yourselves and, by extension, for those who you represent. We also would like to object to reinserting the automatic CPI increase into the budget. Again, we believe it is important to preserve the oversight of the council in this matter. The requirement of the council action on a CPI increase has served the community well by leaving money in our back pockets over the last several years. To build this increase automatically back into the mayor's budget would be a loss to the property taxpayers of our city, and it would result in a loss of the important freedom to refer a tax issue to a vote of the people should there be a will to do so. An automatic tax increase every year would be like money from home without writing for those who are budgeting, but it's a step backward for our city. We believe that the two most important things that make a community an attractive place to live and work are low property taxes and a responsible and responsive local government. Rapid City property tax owners are under assault from every government entity. As you've probably told your kids, just because you can do something doesn't mean you ought to. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanchi. Next speaker I have on item number 14 is Mr. Kurt Pokart. Kurt, if you come forward, introduce yourself, and again, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I agree with Ms. Weaver. Doesn't happen very often, but I agree this time. There was a reason to adopt this mechanism, to have the council review the person that would be hired as not only the mayor's assistant, but also the assistant to the council. I don't need to lecture you on what your role is, but this process is also my opportunity to be heard on it. The mayor will select the person and will submit that to you. As you probably all know, the role of the council then is advise and consent. You probably recall a year or so ago, we had a chief of police retire, and the council took an active role in helping select his successor. That's the proper role for the council, to rein the mayor in if and when it's necessary. And again, you are my voice in this process, and I think that's important. I'm urging you not to skip this step, not to eliminate it. I don't need to lecture you on the history. You probably all remember, back when the city offices were down on 22 Main Street, and we had lots of mayors since that time, and we had very few administrative assistants since that time. However, it's become a bit of a revolving door here recently since Kay Rippentrop retired. We haven't found a good Kay, I don't think, since Kay hung up her phone or whatever she had whatever her tools were. In any case, I would urge you to look beyond this mayor and this council. You're putting in place processes and procedures that will apply long after you are gone, we hope. And so there's a purpose for it, and I think there's no reason to remove this step. But I would urge you to reject item number 14.
Thank you, Mr. Pokart. That's all the speaker request forms I have at this time. I just want to make sure we haven't skipped anybody or missed anyone. Thank you. Moving on to item 14. So we'll close public comment period. Item 14 is the second reading and recommendation of ordinance number 6070, an ordinance reclassifying the executive assistant program coordinator within the mayor's office, so the position is no longer an officer of the city, by repealing section 2.12.070 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. I have a motion to table and a second by Alderman Roberts. Since there is no debate on the tabling discussion, those in favor of moving to table, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 15, which is to authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign real property purchase agreement between the city of Rapid City and Pennington County for property located at 703 Adams Street. Motion by Alderman Laurenti to approve, second by Alderwoman Drew to approve the purchase of the property. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Number 16 is second reading and recommendation of ordinance 6068 regarding supplemental appropriation number 3 for 2015. Motion by Alderman Laurenti to approve, second by Alderman Roberts. Those in favor, not seeing any lights, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Item number 17 is resolution number 2015-091 of intent to take the statutory authorized increase in property tax revenue as part of the annual appropriation ordinance for 2016, and I have a recommendation from the finance officer to send to council without recommendation. Second. Motion on the table right now is to deny by Alderman Laurenti, second by Alderman Roberts. And the lights are coming up. Alderwoman Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My initial response to this is to vote in favor of the increase. I know it's never popular to increase taxes, but I think this is something we've been putting off for a long time for that very reason. But I do think it should be reviewed by the full council, since we had a 4-4 vote on this during our last budget hearings, and I could go either way on this if the proper types of arguments are laid out. But right now, I'm leaning towards in favor of it. But for sake of discussion, I'd like to see it go to the council.
Thank you. Let's go to Alderman Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair. And I made the motion to deny purely because of the fact that a case has not been made to take the property tax increase. There hasn't been one person, staff, or up on this dais as an elected official that has justified taking the increase. And I have pointed out in previous meetings all of the additional revenue that the city receives to cover the argument that they're trying to make, which is to cover the inflationary cost to do government business. The fact of the matter is, anybody who gets a pay increase in this city and lives in the city limits spends that increase here. They aren't asking for any more government services. They aren't growing government so that they need to increase the amount of money going to government. They're just spending more money in this town, increasing the sales tax revenue here in Rapid City. One other source of revenue that I've discussed, which has not been refuted, is the increase in property taxes. I have owned my own home since 1996. I have not asked the city to do anything additionally to support my home, yet my taxes have more than doubled. That is an additional tax increase in revenue that covers the inflationary costs of government. I have yet to hear anybody in this town, let alone this office, justify a property tax increase. And I will not vote for it until it can be justified. And that means we need to look at our finances, make priorities, and if we need to make cuts, then we need to make cuts. And that's what families in Rapid City do. So I will not support a tax increase until a proper argument has been made. So I'm hoping that my colleagues will adapt the same thinking, that we shouldn't just increase property taxes and say, well, I'm going to vote for it until somebody gives me a good reason not to vote for it. In fact, as an elected official, it's incumbent upon us to say, wait. Government wants an increase from us too. We're all property taxpayers. They need to justify it. They can't say, well, there's a CPI thing that another government entity has put together, and it's called the CPI. And so therefore, for our region, the CPI, our federal government, another government agency, by the way, says we should take at least 1.5% because that was the inflationary cost. But what is the inflationary cost for Rapid City's government? Nobody has been able to make that case, and I will not support it until it's done. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, let's go to the finance officer, Pauline Sumption.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple things. First of all, just looking at utilities alone lately, they have been increasing anywhere from 8 to 10% for electric and MDU costs. That is not covered by sales tax. We have continually done more with less. Not even the same. We've done more with less in the last 5 years because we have not taken the CPI. Growth does not cover inflationary costs. Tires, because fuel goes up, tires go up. It's a ripple effect on everything in our budget. The other thing I will tell you, and I was hoping to save this for Tuesday night because I knew it was going to be a hot topic, and I said this at a budget meeting. Undesignated cash is one-time money. You cannot continue to use one-time money on ongoing expenses and expect that money to still be there in the end. And that's the direction this will go, because right now we're using over $3 million of undesignated cash to balance our budget. If you do not take CPI, my recommendation is you go back to the budget and you cut $224,000 out of that general fund budget. We have no more revenue to increase unless you want to do it arbitrarily. We have, the only option, in my mind, is to cut those expenses. So if this is the direction that the council wants to go, I would just ask that you be prepared to suggest some cuts come Tuesday night.
Thank you. We'll go next to Alderman Weifenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the comments by our finance director. That's her job, is to make sure that if we're heading down a specific road that we understand where we're going. I've sat on here from 07 to 11. I came back. I've been here another year. And but I will point out the fact that they say that growth doesn't cover the added expenses. Well, when you grow on the backs of the taxpayers by doing tax districts, by forcing that money aside, by not collecting that money, I would agree. But that tells me that your priority is not revenue. So we've made commitments to grow in some areas and have tax districts that do not pay the city tax. The school district still gets their tax, so that money obviously comes from somewhere, right? So basically, that money gets diverted from wherever, whether it's sales tax or wherever the state decides to do it from, and they still get paid. And the people that live in those areas are still paying taxes, and the services are still being charged to those areas, but we don't collect any revenue. I understand that. So to me, the priorities have been drawn. The line in the sand is drawn. People's wages in Rapid City aren't increasing. The median income for a family of 4 people in Rapid City is $41,000 a year. That's for a family of 4. Rapid City, most people in Rapid City have 2 to 3 jobs to pay. I understand that there's other costs involved, but we have to prioritize where we're going to spend the money. And I'd agree with the finance director that we need to cut. If we don't take this, we need to cut it out of our budget as an ongoing thing. But there's room there. There's opportunities there. It just depends on what we want to prioritize. And if any of you go through our budget, you can see, just as a layman, meaning not having knowledge of it, you can probably pick out areas where we could cut and say that the citizens don't need those areas. So it's really hard for me to sit here and say we need this increase and justify it. I can't do that, and I haven't done it, and I won't do it until we actually get good at what we're doing. When we become good spenders of the public's money here and make priorities and go, what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to provide safety, water, sewer, and health environmental issues, those types of things. When we can do that and we're good at that, then we can move on and say, you know, we need more money for whatever it may be, wherever we prioritize those situations. So I'm not going to support this increase. In lieu of the county's looking at wheel tax increases now, that's going to hit the pocketbooks of everybody that drives, everybody in the community. The CPI tax, the argument's always been made that, well, it's only X amount of dollars per year. Well, you start stacking that on top of everything else, and I think someone made mention about governmental agencies coming at us from all directions. We're seeing a slowdown a little bit, and oil prices are dropping, though spending will slow. Gasoline prices aren't dropping, so we still got to spend that to get to work. There's just a lot of things that say that there's opportunity here for us to dig inside and get better at what we do here. When I'm as good as I can be at blocking and tackling, then I'm going to move on to the next issue. But we're not at that point yet. We got plenty of room for opportunity. Another, $10 or whatever it may be on top of the taxpayers, what they're already paying, that adds up. $10 here, $5 here, drainage fee here, whatever fees they are, wherever you increase water fees. I remember back in, I think it was 08 or 09 when we had to really hit people hard with the water fees. I mean, people are getting smoked by that fee now. I mean, their bills have doubled and tripled since that period of time. And we understand, we knew we were going to do that, but we prioritized that, and it was a huge priority, and it made sense because the city taxpayers are to provide water for the community. No other enterprise could really do that and make it work. There's room in our budgets where we're stepping into the bounds of things that we really shouldn't be into. We're seeing it tonight here with this CE thing. It's a complete and utter, to me, I don't get it. I don't understand why we're going to give you 12 more hours, because I'm going to ask the question when that one comes up. How do we justify that? What's our bottom line? What is it going to do for the taxpayers of Rapid City? What are we going to do for the taxpayers of Rapid City by nailing them with another tax increase? In my arena, who I talk to, the people I talk to, they've had enough. They've had enough. And if there's not people up here willing to hold back and say, you know what, we're going to look at cutting some things, absolutely. The thrills and frills of all these things are going to have to be looked at real closely and intensely, and we have to cut them back. I'm okay doing that. And the other thing is the CPI. The people that get hurt the worst are the poorest people in our community. So when we talk about, you'll hear the people go on and on about affordable housing and all that stuff, but what do? We price those people right out. I'm telling you, by the time you pay your taxes, your insurance, your water bill, your electric bill, your gas bill, you made mention here that it was 8 to 10%. The consumer pays that too, guys. That's coming right out of their pocket. They only get this much money to spend. And what happens to them is they have to prioritize now. So other things in their life decrease. Well, other things in the city's life are going to have to decrease too. I agree with that. She's being very responsible by telling us that. Sometimes you got to slap us in the face, but she's told us, now we got to make that decision. I'm not going to support this, and I won't support it. Thank you.
If I may, we'll go to the mayor for comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I missed out on the first part of the conversation, first part of this meeting, so I apologize if you've already covered this, but I would just ask that, knowing full well that a majority of this committee sitting up here is against the CPI, I would just ask that you not deprive the 5 other council people and their constituents from the debate next Tuesday night, and that I would recommend you pass this on to council without recommendation. I think it would be doing a disservice if you did that at this point.
Mr. Mayor, I believe, without really actually making a vote, I believe this will be going to the full council anyway. Okay. And so that it will show up as an item on the agenda for Tuesday night as without making the count, it looks like it'll be a denial. So it'll show up on the agenda as motion to deny, as a recommendation from this committee. But stay tuned, we've got some other lights coming up, so don't go away.
All right, thank you.
We'll next go to Alderman Roberts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it'll just be on the non-consent, so it has to be discussed. And I want to talk a little bit, too, about my ward and my constituents, because my ward, over 50% of the people in my ward live below the poverty level. I'm Ward 4, North Rapid. And a tremendous amount of the people in my ward work more than one job. And I get a little bit irritated sitting up here every year. It's only $10, it's only $20. But like Mr. Weifenbach said, it adds up. It doesn't matter what we do this year. It matters what we do over a 20-year period. So I think there is a lot of room in this budget that we could easily find 200,000 plus. I think we could probably find 5 times that much if we really wanted to. So I just want to say that I think we're going in the right direction. I think that if a few other government entities would hold back a little bit and look for ways to save money, and I know that I find this very interesting. I've been on this council for over 4 years now. When I first came on this council, we had an energy audit that we were looking at to save money on electricity, to save money on whatever happened to it. It went away. We're not looking at that. That's a good idea. That's something we should do. But instead of doing that and looking for ways to find money, we are always looking for new ways to spend money. So anyway, I just want to thank this council for denying this so it can be on non-consent so we can discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Roberts. Alderman Valente.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to clarify something from a previous speaker as well. Mrs. Weaver, I appreciate your comments, but I want you to understand there isn't at this point, but I understand that there is brewing up an intent to get rid of this resolution, which requires us to vote on it separately. And if that indeed does pass by this council, then the people would not have the ability to petition that particular past property tax increase to the ballot. And I honestly believe that is exactly what some of the elected officials on this council and maybe even the mayor's office want to do. I'll let them speak for themselves. But the fact of the matter is there isn't anything here that does that now. On the subject of what we're talking about here, it comes at the highest level of hypocrisy for this elected body to be asking for a property tax increase when in fact we just approved almost unanimously, I think there were 1 or 2 votes against it, to build and pay for a $180 million civic center, which is paid for by an ongoing source of revenue that the city gets every year in perpetuity. In fact, the total of payments of that civic center over the time that we were going to pay for it was projected to be over $300 million. And so this same government body is now saying, we need more of your property tax increases because of the cost of the inflationary costs of government. And again, just remember, ladies and gentlemen, I have pointed out 2 sources of revenue that have nothing to do with growth, that growth pays for growth. In fact, this government body hasn't even made a case that growth and the new services that needed to be provided for that growth are dollar for dollar. There hasn't even been a case made for that, let alone saying we need property tax increases for the inflationary costs. We're so far behind making a case for taking this property tax increase that it's laughable that we, on one hand, say we can build a $180 million civic center with ongoing tax revenues from the people, from the taxpayers, but we need to take a $220,000 property tax increase, which it doesn't sound like a lot, and that's what the people who will vote for it will say. It's only, as has been said, it's only $20 a year per 100,000 assessed, whatever the number is. But $220,000 over 10 years is $2.2 million. In perpetuity, go out 20 years, $4.4 million. That's discounting any other property tax increases that any government body takes over the next 10 years. So I will not support it. And again, we need to make sure that we're holding government accountable to making a case for taking more money from the people. I yield.
Thank you. Alderwoman Darla Drew.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
As I look at this and listen to the arguments, I believe that this should not go in perpetuity. If this passes, I would like to see it is something that's discussed every year. So I'd like to see that part of it taken out. I don't see that that's part of the ordinance here. Maybe it's inferred, but I don't see that as part of the ordinance. That'll be continue to be forever. Is that correct?
Is that a question?
Once you take it, you always take it. Is that correct?
If I can take the question over to our city attorney.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This resolution doesn't change anything. It is in conformance with the previous resolution that, the confusion thing is that it was always just the CPI was always just part of the budget. It was included. It never really was discussed separately. Whether or not you have the resolution that says it needs to be discussed separately, it is always as part of the budget, just like any other line item in the budget, a topic for discussion or consideration. At some point, it was decided in 2012 that they wanted to highlight it, and a resolution was adopted that says you will consider that separately, so everyone was very clear whether or not it was being taken. this resolution conforms, and this resolution is being brought forward pursuant to that policy. So it doesn't change that policy. There hasn't been anything brought forward to change that policy that was adopted in 2012.
Well, I'm sitting with members of the council here who have never been out there asking for help or money with their program, be it city-oriented or whatever it is. You know, I worked for a couple different groups that had to come before the council, and we call it our yearly flogging, to ask for, you know, our money for. So I say, fine, if you can find ways to cut this budget and you can look your constituents in the face and say, you know what, you don't need that soccer field money. No, I'm sorry, you don't need that performing arts money. You know, those are kind of things you're going to have to decide on, gentlemen. So you can look at them, you can go ahead and go through that budget and pick out things, and you're going to have some people that will be talking to you about why are you doing that. Believe me, your phone will be ringing just as much as being in support of this and not taking those tax increases. There will be people with you talking to you about, I want you to support my program. You said you would, now you're backing off. So just take that into consideration, because your neighbors will be talking to you.
Thank you. If I may go to the finance officer next, Pauline Sumption.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To clarify something, since I've been with the City of Rapid City, and it was not required to have a separate resolution and a separate discussion for the CPI, it still happened. It still happened at the budget meetings. It still happened where the finance office pointed out this much is from CPI, because on our revenue sheets we separated out the property tax base versus CPI increase versus growth. So that discussion did happen, whether that ordinance was in place to have the separate discussion or not. And I would encourage it to happen every year, because for the very reasons you guys are all talking about it. That's all I have on that.
I'm sure they will continue on Tuesday evening as well. Pauline, thank you. Let's see. We'll take a toss-up. Let me do with Alderman Roberts. It's been a couple of speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we're kind of beating this to death here at a legal finance meeting, but you know, I don't have the chance to sit on legal finance very often, so I got to get my big mouth going a little bit. You know, I do agree with Pauline. I do agree with Joel. This was discussed for years. But putting in an ordinance does one thing. It puts us as public officials, it puts us on the record as how we vote. And I think that that's very important, especially nowadays in politics, because you can sit and discuss anything all day long. But unless you're held accountable, you're not being held accountable. So thank you very much.
I'm going to skip over you, Steve, and go to Alderman Weifenbach for a moment. And please keep the comments to the motion. We're getting straight off the topic.
I get held to the rules and nobody else does. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The same will be applied to the rest of the
I
council.
can tell you that I've been
way off subject here.
When I was on the council in 07 and 2011, the reason that this came to be, separating it out, was the mayor at that time would just bring it forward. He'd calculate it into his budget, and then if you didn't like it, then you had to vote against the entire budget. And then they'd look at you and go, well, you didn't want to fund the policemen, you didn't want to fund the firemen, so that's why this is split. Don't anybody ever forget that. I voted against that because I didn't want the increase, and then they came back and said, well, you didn't vote for the budget. I'm like, well, it's because you took that tax increase. So there's reasons that when other councils in the past do things that they did, they're not all out there, not all of them. So that's why I wanted to make that clear. And it was back in, I think, it had to be back in 10 or 11 when this got changed. So, and it didn't get put into an ordinance till 12. So, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Ryan Tate.
Thank you, Chair. If I can, I'd like to ask the city attorney a question, please.
Please.
Since he covered that particular subject. Joel, on the fact that it used to be just part of the budget, if, of course, we're not even talking about that because we do have a resolution, at least right now still. But if there isn't a resolution and the mayor takes the CPI, includes it in his budget every year, do the people, the voters, have the ability to refer the budget to a ballot to defeat the tax increase?
You know, I've done research on that before. It's not clear, but my gut is no, you cannot refer the budget. But I will say I think the implication is that the resolution that you're responding to, I mean, it's going to be a problem if at some point the resolution gets voted down and it's actually included in the budget. It's the actual budget ordinance that you approve that matters. So whether or not you vote down this or approve this resolution, I don't think that necessarily is referable, or if it's included in the budget then and the budget's approved by the requisite number of votes, that can be referred.
Okay, so currently we have a resolution that requires a separate vote to take the CPI. If it gets approved, does that not allow the voters then to refer that to the ballot?
I don't believe so, because I don't know what effect it would have, because the actual increase would occur by being included in the budget ordinance that was approved.
So let me ask you another follow-up question then. Is there a way then to make this resolution binding in that it can be referred to the ballot?
I don't know that it can. I mean, if you've got, as was pointed out, this was a way to allow everyone to see how the individual council members were voting on this issue in particular. But at the same time, the actual increase, is in the budget ordinance that's approved by the council. But if there's a tie, then the mayor can't break a tie on the budget ordinance. You need 6 council members to vote to approve the budget. If 6 council members vote to approve the budget and the CPI is in it, the CPI is in it, and I don't know that you can separate that out for referral.
So then, Joel, one last question on that particular issue. Since the mayor includes it in his budget, you're saying that and you're saying that you're not, it sounds like you're not absolutely sure, and I would like to hear, if take this as some direction that we could get some clarity on whether this resolution is referable, because it seems to me a property tax increase, much like the school board tried to opt out, that was referred to the ballot. Now, legally there may be some differences, but I would like some I know I want some clear air on whether, because I do believe that there is some in the works that are wanting to get rid of this resolution to have a separate vote on taking the CPI. So I would like some absolute clarity on whether this is something that's referable or not.
I don't know that I can give you absolute clarity. Quite frankly, if somebody tries to refer it, it's going to make new law. There's not other communities that have this kind of resolution or this kind of process. So there isn't cases I can look at to tell you, well, this is how it was decided or this is what it's going to be. I can give you some opinions, and that's about the best that I'm going to be able to do.
All right, very good. And if it comes down to that, I'm hoping that the people stand up, much like they did for the opt-out. I yield.
Thank you, and I appreciate the questions, Alderman Rentry, and keeping it to topic as well. Thank you. Not seeing any other lights. The chair has a couple of comments on this. If I may be so bold as to suggest that I will be voting no on the denial, and that is for the following reasons, and I've got it very short here, is that we're waiting on a lot of roads out there that are taking about 200 years to do reconstruction. My neighbors are also getting flooded out, and those situations are coming about because of the lack of the ability to do what we need to do within the city, and in his case, what we need to do to build some kind of infrastructure for this area that he lives in, so that his home and neighbors' homes do not get flooded. And my last and largest concern is that with not going with the CPI. I feel very strongly we're headed in the same direction as what will be happening to, or is happening currently with the school system. They are going in the wrong direction as well. And being able to fund everything that needs to be funded, and I'm talking about just topics that need to be funded. We're going in the wrong direction of not being able to fund those necessary or needs within the city. So that's the only comments I have at this point. So thank you for the great articulation of your points. Thank you very much for all sides in this. The motion now is to deny. Those in favor saying aye to the motion to deny the taking the CPI. Please say aye. Those opposed? Aye. Aye. Motion carries to deny on 3-2. Thank you. Would Maggie, do you need the names? Okay, thank you. The item number 18 is to do the second reading and recommendation of ordinance 6069 regarding FY 2016 appropriation. Sorry, it is an FYI. So the second reading and recommendation of ordinance 6009. Let's go to Alderman Roberts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to clarify why I'm going to be voting no on this is because the CPI is added into this budget. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Alderman Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess the simplest part would be to say ditto to Mr. Roberts' comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the Finance Office.
Thank you,
Wayne Sumption, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My recommendation on this one is also to take it to council without recommendation, especially now with a 3-2 vote on the CPI resolution. I would rather you guys, as a full council, have that conversation. We know for sure if we need to go back and cut or not, and we can make those changes as we go. If you deny it now, granted, it's still going to be on non-consent, but I would, and either way it would be on a non-consent calendar because it's an ordinance, but at this point I just request that it go to council without recommendation.
Thank you. Alderman Weifenbach, do you have a motion for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move this to council without recommendation, and I would like to hold the floor to explain my rationale.
Alderwoman Drew seconds. You still have the floor.
This is exactly the position that I just told you guys about. This whole CPI thing should have been voted on a long time ago. This is the proverbial nose of the camel under the tent. This is intentional. It's not unintentional. It's very intentional, because now if I vote against the budget, I'm voting not to fund the finance department, the public works department, the fire department, but yet I still don't get my voice on the CPI. So I appreciate all the witnesses I have out here. I'll move this forward without recommendation. We'll have a discussion on Monday. Tuesday. Yeah, we won't be here Monday.
Celebrate
We're doing continuing ed or something. Thanks.
Celebrating my holiday. Alderman Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate Alderman Weifenbach's comments. However, I do disagree purely because of the fact of what he just stated, is that they preload this into the budget, and guess what, ladies and gentlemen, council doesn't get involved in the budget till the last 1/8, 10th of the budget, if you will. So I can guarantee you the people who voted against taking the CPI would have voted against a budget that had it in there in the very beginning of the formation of this budget. But the fact of the matter is, this is when we have our voice. So I'm going to make my voice heard. I'm not concerned about voting against a budget. My first budget, when I first got elected, in fact, I voted against the first 2 budgets. I have no problem with that and explaining why. And so, Mr. Weifenbach, I would urge you to defeat your own motion, because the fact of the matter is, this will go to council. This will go to council, and we will have the debate. So this doesn't do anything, and we are a recommending body, and we should be recommending. We shouldn't be just passing the buck. We should be saying yes or no. Otherwise, we don't need this body. So I don't understand why we would pass anything without a recommendation. That's our job. Thank you.
Thank you. One more from the Finance Office.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will just say it's hard to even have a recommendation when you don't know if this is going to be the final ordinance when it's all said and done because of the vote. That's the only reason why I'm asking to go to council without recommendation. We don't know what the end result's going to be yet.
Thank you. The chair does not have a motion in front of it yet. May I ask for a motion to... Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. I did not write it down. Thank you. Motion is to send to council without recommendation. My apologies, Ron. I didn't write it down. So that's the motion. And those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No. Aye.
Chair votes aye. If I can do a roll call. Let's do a roll call, Maggie, just to be on the safe side. It's getting a little confusing up in there. Motion is to, see if I second, Maggie, if I've been asked for a clarification on the motion is to send to council without recommendation. Yes. And aye. Motion carries. Motion carries 3-2 to send to council without recommendation. Thank you. Appreciate the lively discussion. Item number 19 is the introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6074, an ordinance to adjust the continuing education requirements for contractors licensed by the city by amending section 15.04.140 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. And if I may, I'll go to Brad Solon, if you could give us a little bit of background on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Brad from Development Services. I'm just going to give a brief presentation here. I don't know if I can explain it to you in a short period of time even, because it's fairly confusing and there's a lot of opposition to it and there's some people for it too, and there's a lot of what-ifs flying around. So that's what we're talking about is the contractor CEUs. The proposal that was sent from Building Board was to increase it from 6 hours to 12 hours generally, and this is for continuing education credits that contractors need to provide when they renew their license. And in the past, there's a varied amount of hours that have been required. Plumbing and electrical are regulated by the state, and essentially 8 hours per year, or 24 hours for a 3-year period for those. And that's not entirely accurate. I've got another slide here, but plumbing and electrical are not part of this proposal. If you they're under their own continuing ed. Residential was 1 hour per year for a number of years under the old residential board, so they needed 3 hours for a 3-year license period. Commercial, up until just a few years ago, 2010 or so, they didn't need a license. And so there was no continuing education required for commercial contractors. But now there is. 6 hours are currently required for commercial. Sign contractors were required to provide a varied amount. It was from none to 1 per year. And then under the current ordinance that got changed here not too long ago, it's 6. And we've heard a lot of debate from the sign contractor industry because there's no sign contractor education available in Rapid City. They have to go to the national convention or to the East Coast or West Coast, just like Mr. Jackson said. It's a problem for them. So it's at 6 now. House movers were none. It's 6. Roofing contractors are, of course, relatively new. You know, the roofing ordinance went into effect in 2010, and then shortly after that, the roofing contractors were required to get a license, and they're required 6. Mechanical contractors. Initially, mechanical contractors were 6. After a period of time, and this has been 10 or 12 years ago now, they changed it to 12. Mechanical contractors, several of them, the proponents of this are of the opinion that they need to get their people in their trade more education. And so right now, though, they're only required 6. For a brief period of time, 12 hours required for all categories, but under the last administration, a subsequent committee was formed and the requirement was taken back to 6 hours. The current requirement is 6, excluding plumbing and electrical. There's my memo to the building board. Now, when we went to building board a couple times in June, you can see on the memo, and when they had a couple more meetings since then, we didn't recommend that they do it. You know, our thoughts were that if, you know, you only need to provide 6. If you want to get 40, go ahead. So that's where we're at. There are some other philosophies floating around too, you know. Back in the day when we used to give the test, we don't give the tests anymore. It's for a new contractor. We had a number of contractors that would come in and not provide any continuing ed, and they would just retest. So a book smart person, or who was code smart, could just take the test and not do it and not deal with it. Kind of defeats the purpose of the continuing ed if you want people to learn new things. But these days, since they have to pay for the tests, I'd like to think that that's going to happen less. And so we've had a number of contractors like roofers, house movers, especially the assigned contractors. They're worried about this. Where are they going to get 12 hours? We've got a lot of we've got a lot of opposition from the builders for this, and but the proponents, you know, one of them was here earlier, but I don't see him now. But they didn't show up at the last building board meeting, so I'm not getting any input from the people that want to change it. So at this time, I'd recommend that you just leave it at 6.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Let's go to Alderman Roberts. Stay tuned for questions. Rod.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a motion to table this.
Okay, we'll do that. The motion is by Alderman Roberts to table this. Alderman Laurenti seconded. Since there's no discussion on the tabling motion, those in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Motion denied. We got one more. Item 20 is the request by the City of Rapid City to consider an application for an amendment to the comprehensive plan by adopting the plan, Rapid City Comprehensive Plan Quarterly Update, and ratifying the plan, Rapid City Comp Plan, approved in April 2014. And everybody's abandoning us, so would you like to speak on this?
I would like to give just a real quick update.
If you'll introduce yourself again.
Patsy Horton from
Thank you, Patsy.
Community Planning and Development Services. There are a couple items that are linked to this action. One is a list of all of the accomplishments that we have seen within the last couple years since the plan was adopted. We went through chapters 3 through 9 of our comprehensive plan to identify what goals, specific goals, were either addressed or ongoing or have been initiated. So there is a 6-page list of all of those things that the member agencies have submitted. Some participated, some I know will be coming forth with some of their items later. The next item is a priority action plan, and that is basically from chapter 11, which is our implementation plan. And I copied it directly from our comp plan on all of the different issues, either immediate term, near term, which is 2 to 5 years, and long term, which is more than 5 years. And so with that, I also added a column that is entitled Status as of August 15th, and that goes through every one of our action items, whether we've initiated it, whether it's ongoing, whether we still have yet to start it, and it also identifies the lead agency that's responsible for that particular task. So if you have any questions about that. But then I also want to bring up just a couple notable projects that we've started in our department, and then also another community agency. We have the arts community has started an update of their cultural plan, and they are in the middle of that. I know that they're going to have another consultant meeting, open house scheduled here shortly, I believe toward the end of September. And then also we've hired a consultant to update our downtown master plan. And I know that you've gotten a notice on the consultant coming to town to visit with you folks, and we would encourage you to participate in all of those planning sessions that are available to you. But with that, we do recommend approval of this amendment.
Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion. Is there a second? Second by Alderman Roberts. If I may add, Patsy, I really appreciate the report and update on it because it looks very, very well done. There's three main areas that I'm generally interested in, how we're going to be able to pursue those, and that's transportation is one big item that keeps coming in front of me. And I know the mayor has spoke about we seem to be in the doldrums about economic development. I believe this update also addresses that to some degree, but I think we need to go up to another level or find another, raise the bar some way, somehow on how to help out the community on getting more and better paying jobs within the city. So hopefully we can keep working with the mayor on those two items there. Yes, Patsy.
I'm sorry, I thought you said three.
And then obviously streets. That's a big one for me. The housing is another area which I'm totally interested in, but the upkeep and maintaining of streets, and I think that's all of those items are addressed in there.
There are a couple other things I would like to add since you brought those up.
Please.
We actually just received our final report of our long-range transportation plan for the whole metropolitan planning area. That area goes from north of Elk Creek down to Spring Creek, out to Caputa, and to the west over to Haisika. So it's like a 450 square mile area. That long-range transportation plan is going to the MPO on the 17th. You will see it as an amendment to our comp plan shortly thereafter. That gives us a 20-year plan on the projects that we need to undertake based on capacity issues, based on public input, based on all different kinds of activities that we went through to get that study complete. So you'll see those recommendations coming forward here shortly. The second one is you had questioned economic development, and I know that Brett and Joel are working with the Municipal League to come up with some additional financing tools for the state, since generally the only one we have is a tax increment district, and we know how we know some of the feelings on that particular financial tool. So there are a couple other issues that I wanted to share with you.
Thank you. And then those, I did wind up with 4 items, so thank you for clarifying some of those. Alderman Weifenbach.
Thank you. I can't sit here and not comment about the streets thing. I mean, we have money from the Vision Fund and the CPI that are used for streets. It's been put on the council to not join those two together. It was done anyway by some of the same people that keep talking about streets. If you want to fix the streets, we can fix the streets. Let's appropriate the funds to fix the streets. We're not going to take the funds out of the general fund to fix the streets. We're not going to take the funds out of our comprehensive plan to fix the streets. The streets can be fixed. We just have to make it a priority to fix the streets. Thank you.
Alderman Weifenbach, you mentioned CPI. Did you mean CIP? CIP. Thank you. Okay, just wanted to make sure we understood what your intent was. Thank you. Not seeing any other lights. The motion is to adopt. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Okay. Those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.